So my talk is weight regain, physiological or pathophysiological reaction. This is my conflict of interest, and there is no conflict in this talk. So my outline will be definition of weight regain, outcomes of weight regain, physiological of weight regain, and prevention of weight regain. So sadly, we know that every attempt to lose weight is finished by regain, nearly every attempt, and this is a study that really take all the elements until this point. You can see that very low-calorie diet is very impressive in weight loss, but then there is a regain. And in fact, the only thing that maintains the weight is the combination with medication, but at general, it's really very disappointing. So what is the definition of weight maintenance? We can see here the definition of HIL that really puts an intentional weight loss of 10% or more of the body weight kept for at least 1 year. And by their experience, only 21% of the patients that lost weight really succeeded to maintain the weight loss for 1 year, meaning 80% of their cohort didn't succeed, the regain. And we found a lot of definition in the literature, maintain weight loss 5 to 10% at least 1 year, maintain new weight for 2 years after weight loss, gaining no more than 2.2 kilogram or 5% of weight after weight loss. This is after 4 years, remaining weight within the goal of weight. So there is a lot of definition, but I think the definition of HIL is the best one. Very recently, there is a paper in the JAMA that tried to define weight regain after bariatric surgery. And they showed us that the main regain after bariatric surgery is in the first 2 years. You can see 20% weight regain after 2 years, and then it plateaus. And they really defined what they think is the best measurement for weight regain. So from the point of nadir of weight, the lowest point of weight lost after bariatric surgery, they took several measurements. And they concluded the measurement of maximum weight loss after the nadir weight is the best measurement. So according to this paper, the measurement of maximum weight loss after the nadir is the best measurement or the best definition after bariatric surgery. And you can measure it according to 10%, 20%, and 25% of maximum weight loss after the nadir. So this is the best definition that was put in the literature until now. So what are the outcomes of weight regain? There is morbidity. Again, in this paper, they showed us that if the patient has regained weight, and I want you to look on the diabetes curve, it's a linear curve. If you regain weight after the nadir, you will develop diabetes around 15%, and in the end, 30% after 5 years from the nadir that regain weight will develop diabetes and all the other problems, hyperlipidemia, mental problem, and less satisfaction from the operation. So this is one look on the outcomes. The other one is if you look on the measurement of maximum weight loss, you can see that the highest, if you take 20% weight loss after a nadir, regain of 20% of weight loss after the nadir, you have 64% risk, relative risk to develop to diabetes or hyperlipidemia or hypertension. Meaning if you regain weight, so you developed or reappeared the diabetes, or you developed hypertension, or you are developing hyperlipidemia. So regaining weight creates morbidity. And this is very interesting study. 8 women, postmenopausal, and they instruct them for 5 months to do lifestyle changes and let them free, and after 1 year, measure the weight. So they divided the cohort regarding maintainers and regainers. And we can see here, if you look on the glucose, insulin, and HOMA beta, that regaining weight, again, affect all these measurements. So if you are regaining weight, you will be much more insulin resistant than you would have been in the beginning. And I think the best study to show us the outcome is The Biggest Loser. So you know this reality show. In the beginning, the 14 participants lost 58 kilograms and regained weight after 6 years, 70% of the initial weight loss. They didn't lose any protein or fat-free mass, but they're gaining a lot of fat mass. And when you look, and this is sometimes you neglect this observation. When you look on the incidence, in the beginning, in the beginning, the baseline, those patients didn't have any prediabetes. After 6 years, they developed prediabetes. Meaning, in this point, they were fat, they were obese, but healthy obese. In this point, after they regained weight, they developed prediabetes. They were much more insulin resistant. If you look on the HOMA IR, it's 2.5 and 3.6 after 6 years. Meaning, regaining weight can complicate the glucose measurements and developed prediabetes and insulin resistance. So it's not just to return the weight that you lost. And we really should think about the regaining of weight as a new disease. So what is the physiology of weight regain? So I took these slides from Lee Kaplan, which describe amazing study. So they took this OB mice, and they gave the line of the OB mice ad libitum eating. And this is the curve of the ad libitum. The second line, they force feed this mouse, and you can see that this force feeding caused much higher or much larger weight gain, but there is a plateau. Meaning if you give this mouse a tremendous amount of food, they will reach plateau. And then their diet, the third line of mouse, and of course they lost weight, but they reach a plateau. And this border are the setup point of this OB mice. This is the higher point of set point, and this is the lower point of set point, meaning this, between this line, the mouse can regain weight or gain weight or lost weight. And then they finished the study. And what happened is that this line returned to the original line, and this line returned to the original line. So this is a physiological mechanism that caused the weight to be like this. And when you change the physiological mechanism, will reduce to the line of the set point. So this is a very interesting physiological mechanism that causes, at least in mouse, to regain weight until the point of set point. Now, to understand it in human, I will use two studies. This is a very famous study, symmetrical study, that showed that if you took 50 individuals and you give them very low-calorie diet, you create a tremendous weight loss. And then, if you stop the very low-calorie diet, they, of course, regain. And they measured several measurements. First of all, the hunger. And we can see this is the baseline hunger. This is the 10-week hunger. Of course, very high hunger after a very low-calorie diet. But after 1 year, the hunger measurement were the same as 10 weeks after the study, after the beginning of the study, meaning 1 year after stopping the study, after stopping diet, you still have a very high level of hunger. And when they measure the hunger hormone, the ghrelin, okay, after 1 year, the level was higher than baseline, and the satiety hormone, GLP-1 and PYY, the level was much lower. Meaning 1 year after stopping diet, you're much hungrier because the ghrelin is higher and the satiety hormone are lower. This is a physiological mechanism. The second physiological mechanism is coming from Rudy label study in New England that showed us that if you're gaining 10%, so you will excrete total energy expenditure higher by around 400 kilocalories per day. But if you're losing weight, 10% and 20%, you will excrete less energy, around 350 kilocalories per day. So again, this is the border of the set point. If you gain weight, you will excrete more energy expenditure. And if you lose weight, you will reduce your energy expenditure by 350 kilocalories per day. So if you summarize these processes, if you reduce your weight, you will reduce the energy expenditure, total energy expenditure, and you will increase your appetite. And that's why you will regain weight. This is a physiological mechanism that protects us from losing the fat mass, because fat mass is the life reserve for every human being. In order to show a very two interesting study that really are extraordinary example of this physiological mechanism, I will show you this study. So if you give SGLT2 to a patient, SGLT2 just secrete the glucose in the urine. It inhibits the reabsorption of glucose in the urine. This is the most powerful and advanced treatment for diabetes today. So you're not increasing your energy or energy expenditure. You're not eating less calorie. You just take medication. This medication causes you to secrete calories in the urine. So you lose every day 300 calories, and you're losing only 3 kilograms. If you calculate it, if you lose every day 300 kilocalories in the urine, you should lose much more than 3 kilograms. And what happened in this study, that when you compare the placebo to those who took this medication, you see that those who took this medication ate much more, because this is a physiological mechanism. Because it caused us to eat much more calorie because we are losing calorie. Another very important, very interesting study, they didn't really plan to observe this, but again, this is another SGLT2, okay? This is the observed weight loss, 3 kilograms. This is the expected weight loss according to the excrete of calorie in the urine. You see the difference. The difference is that if you take men and women, they ate much more energy per day than in the baseline that we expected. So that's the reason that they didn't lose 10 or 11 kilograms. But when they measured the energy expenditure, so according to this rule that metabolic adaptation, they had to lose much less, or they had to excrete much less energy, and they didn't, okay? So we have different forces when we are taking this medication, but it's a wonderful example how the physiological mechanism really prevent us to lose weight. The other study is coming from Professor Luca Bussetto. very unique and very interesting study. So they took several women, healthy women, and they made liposuction. And the liposuction, okay, caused them to lose weight. So they didn't increase the energy expenditure, they didn't diet, they just had liposuction. But they decreased the energy expenditure because they lost fat mass. Again, showed us the wonderful physiological mechanism that causes us regain. Because if you're losing fat mass and you decrease your energy expenditure, you will regain. So these processes are termed energy gap. So we have higher hunger and we have less energy expenditure, and these all hormones are participating in this party. We see we have higher ghrelin, lower PYY, lower GLP-1, lower leptin, okay, so it causes hunger, and we have less sympathetic activity and less leptin, and that's why we have less energy expenditure. Now, a few words on leptin. Leptin is the hormone that connects or gives a signal from the fat mass to the arcuate nucleus, activated the POMAC that secrete alpha MSH that activated MC4 receptor. And activation of MC4 receptor downstream reduce the appetite and increase the sympathetic activity. So if you have less leptin or you have leptin resistance, like insulin resistance, so you will have higher appetite and less sympathetic activity. And that's what happened if you are removing the fat mass, like in Luca Bussetto study. We have less leptin because we have less fat mass. So this is why we are regaining. It's a physiological mechanism that increases the hunger and decrease the energy expenditure. So how can we prevent the regain? This is the most important question. We can look on the National Weight Control Registry in the States, and these patients and these people or subjects had lost 30 kilograms and keep it for at least 5 years. And what we learned from this registry is that 45% lost weight by themselves, but 55 had help. Most of them really used less than 1,400 kilocalories per day. They had everyday breakfast. They weighed themselves at least once a week. They watch less than 10-hour television, which is very good. And they had at least 200 minutes, between 200 to 300 minutes per day physical activity. So that's the facts that we learned from this registry. So in order to really prevent regain, we have to reduce the energy gap, to reduce the hunger, and to increase the energy expenditure. So I won't talk about the dietitian advice or the energy because there is other lecture, but I want to show you the second study of these big losers. And in this study, they took the successful weight maintenance and those who regain weight. Those who maintain above 30% of their weight loss and those who didn't maintain it. And we can see that those who maintain the weight maintain almost 25% weight loss from the baseline, and those who regain 1.1% of the baseline weight. And they found that there is a difference. So most of us would think that the difference is regarding the calorie that they used. So when they compared the calorie that they used per day, they showed that there wasn't any difference between the reduction of calorie. Those group who maintained the weight reduce the calorie from baseline by 400 kilocalories per day, and those reduce the calorie regarding about 300. So there wasn't difference in the content or the calorie of food. The difference came from the energy expenditure that they had. Those who maintained the weight had 766 kilocalories per day in energy expenditure, meaning that those maintainers had 80 minutes per day. They did 80 minutes per day physical activity. Those who didn't succeed did 35 minutes per day. 35 minutes per day physical activity, and they didn't succeed to maintain the weight loss. So this is the crucial part. And we know today that if you want to maintain your weight loss, the crucial or the most important thing is physical activity, not so much changing the content of food. The second thing is medication. And as I showed you before, there is reduction of the satiety hormone. And one of them is GLP-1. And we can see here, 3-year study, if you are giving GLP-1, like liraglutide, you can maintain most of the weight loss. And we know from human study that this GLP-1 is really acting on the satiety centers and inhibiting the hunger. So you can inhibit the hunger, and you can really increase the physical activity, and this will help to maintain the weight. And the last slide that I want to show you again from this Biggest Loser study, they compared the Biggest Loser study to Roux-en-Y study, to Roux-en-Y surgery. And what they showed that the Roux-en-Y study, the Roux-en-Y surgery didn't have this metabolic adaptation compared to the Biggest Loser. And they correlated with leptin and energy balance. And if you can see here, the Biggest Loser, okay, this is the black dot, had much less leptin and much higher energy balance decrease. And if you take these rectangles of Roux-en-Y, you can see that after a year in the group of Roux-en-Y surgery, they didn't reduce the weight, the energy expenditure so much, only about 500 kilocalories per day compared to the Biggest Loser. And the leptin level wasn't so low. So maybe Roux-en-Y helps us not to reduce so much the calorie and does not reduce the leptin so much. That's why in the Roux-en-Y, we don't have metabolic adaptation and we have much less regain. So if I want to conclude, successful maintaining lost weight is difficult for many obese and overweight individuals who diet and lose weight. Metabolic adaptation occurs with weight loss that result in increased hunger, which is discordant with a simultaneous reduction in energy requirements and so-called energy gap. This metabolic adaptation have been characterized with the increased hunger and decreased satiety and satiation associated with elevation of the eroxogenic hormone ghrelin and decreasement of anorexogenic hormone, including CCK and PYY and GLP-1. So the lower total daily energy expenditure that accompany weight loss results from 3 main reasons. The disproportional greater decrease in circulating leptin and resting metabolic rate, lower decrease in thermogenesis, owing to reduction in food consumption, and increase in energy efficacy. And that's why I think that weight regain is maladaptive physiological mechanism in obesogenic environment. And thank you for the attention.